Hello and welcome to the programme. Now, last week, the second national consultation on the development of export strategies was held here in Kyiv. The event brought together about 600 representatives of business and industry associations, organisations, unions, reform offices, educational institutions and experts. And I'm pleased to say, here to talk more about this, we are joined in the studio today by Olesya Zaluska, the navigator of the project Export Strategy of Ukraine. Hello, and thank you for coming into our studio.
Thank you for having me here.
So I must say I was a bit daunted by the report. It's tens, if not almost 100 pages long. So I have a challenge. Can you summarise the export strategy of Ukraine?
Actually, it will be hard to summarize it in a few words, and that's why I will try to summarize it in several stages. Okay, so this is the first time when Ukraine switched from the approach traditional products to traditional markets to actually strategic thinking approach. And we are happy and we are really proud that we have managed to do this process according to methodology of International Trade Center, our partners from Geneva. It's a joint venture of WTO and United Nations. And actually this methodology prescribes several principles. The first is inclusiveness. What does it mean? That means that we are calling to everybody, to all the trade support institutions that are involved in creating this trade policy, and then we suppose that these trade support institutions will be engaged into implementation of this strategy. I'm really thank you that you have mentioned all these representatives from we have benefits that more than 300 representatives participated in these consultations, and actually this is the second consultations. The first were held at the beginning of summer. And we are happy to move on with this second stage. But let me briefly return to the whole idea of the project. The export strategy of Ukraine it's not a one document. Actually, it's several phases where we are elaborating different roadmaps. And the first roadmap was focused on all the sectors and was elaborated 2 years, we have elaborated it for more than 1 year. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the previous year, at December 2017, the government adopted the resolution on approval of the strategic trade development roadmap for Ukraine for 5 years. And actually this first document established the vision of Ukraine, that Ukraine wants to switch from traditional product basket to the product basket with knowledge and innovations in it.
Yeah, well, I think that's particularly interesting because if you look back a couple of years, Ukraine's industry was dominated by agriculture, heavy industry, but really this roadmap aims to diversify that. So you talked about knowledge. What other ways would you like to diversify the Ukrainian economy?
Actually, we are focused on diversification of Ukrainian exports, and we want to diversify product structure and geographical structure as well. And of course, to enforce institutional capacities of Ukrainian government. Actually, this roadmap foresees the creation of several institutions that have never been established in Ukraine. For example, Export Promotion Office, the institution that will be focused on providing services directly to exporters.
Yeah, which is hugely successful.
Yeah,
it's had really good results.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Best practices of European and other countries shows the real growth of exports and new exporters are growing thanks to such.
And how do you know which exports to diversify to? What factors does this depend on, for example? Does it depend on demand from the European Union which is where Ukraine is sending more and more of its goods and services to, rather than Russia, which was the traditional market.
You're absolutely right. And we are trying to switch from raw materials to, as we said, value-added, innovation and knowledge-based experts.
But these are in demand.
And when we were defined prospective sectors of Ukraine, basically there were several criteria. The first criteria was where Ukraine is strong enough to propose something to the world with value addition, knowledge and innovations. The second criteria is, of course, as you have said before, the demand of other markets. Since we may not produce what we are like to, we want to sell. Our primary goal to sell and to earn money on this. And the third actually criteria is to spin up development of small and medium enterprise engagement into exports activity. As several surveys showed that we actually has majority of Ukrainian enterprises, small and medium, but only roughly 13% is exporting. So one of the goals is to to support the
because it's these small and medium-sized enterprises that are incredibly important to the economy.
Of course.
You might think of the big manufacturers, but actually, if you have more of these, I mean, it's the same in any country, if you have these small businesses, which also helps you diversify exports as well, because they're involved in different trades, different industries.
Of course, and actually the ministry and the work of the government should be focused on support for these small and medium enterprise. Since big exporters, they already know how to export, they may hire good consultants and to find necessary information to go to some countries for trade missions and exhibitions. And actually for those who may not be strong enough to do this by themselves, the ministry provides several services, trade missions, dialogue platforms. We have reloaded the Intergovernmental Commission instrument, and every business may make his agenda important for the government agenda. And actually this project, one of the goals is to invite the business for the dialogue and invite the business to develop roadmaps for themselves. That's not roadmaps for the government only. It's also for the trade support institutions, for chambers, for associations, for clusters. And if we will see more on prospective sectors, as you have mentioned, we really see that the first market that all the prospective sectors are exporting is European Union. And we see the constant growth of exports to this market. And we are happy about it, since this is one of the biggest markets in the world.
Yes, yeah.
And the recent, DCFTA, let's say, opened this market for us. And it's a great success that Ukrainian producers it was hard to diversify from traditional markets, but they managed to do it, and sometimes it was really not so easy.
And actually, I was going to ask you about this. How challenging has it been to be able to inform Ukrainian businesses about the possibilities of entering the European Union market? Because, for example, you have to think about regulation. This is a key hurdle, not just in Ukraine, but in Europe. In fact, probably almost more so in Europe. Standards, logistics, tax, there's a whole system that you have to think of if you're exporting to the European Union. So how successful do you think you've been in reaching out to business and showing them what is possible?
We may say that we are successful since we see how Ukrainian businesses are successful now in European market and on European shelves. We see it, and the number of new exporters and new products of Ukrainian products on European shelves are growing like each year. And it was a hard time for Ukrainian producers to switch actually from traditional markets to the new market with as you said, different regulations. You should know new languages, let's say like this. That English is not a usual practice in regions, let's say like that. And we have managed to inform most of the regions on possible options how to export. And not only we, a lot of projects, European-funded projects are working in Ukraine to make this possible on technical regulations, on information on regulation other than technical, on possible exhibitions, even organizes some study tours or exhibition tours, inception tours to European Union.
Which actually is really important, because if you're a small farmer in one of the regions, just the idea of sending exports to the European Union is probably pretty daunting. So it's not just having the information, but also getting contacts and showing what markets are out there. What was interesting in your strategy, you defined markets in focus, which is a bit of a novelty in Ukrainian trade. Can you tell us what this is? What is markets in focus?
Actually, markets in focus as well as prospective sectors is novelties in this export strategy. And actually, the idea started from our partners from International Trade Center when they based on gravity model, calculated the markets which are Ukraine like under trades and showed us the figures. We were really surprised, and we saw that our like the match of the product that we are exporting and the product that imported by, for example, US, Germany and UK, and now I'm naming the top 3 markets that is under trade. We understood that we should likely focus our resources on a limited number of markets. And then we have elaborated our own like a methodology and initiated by the ministry and supported by different experts, and added to this gravity model also regulations, proximity of the markets, historical background with these markets, growth of Ukrainian exports at these markets, and we resulted in these focus markets that we have now in the strategy. And actually it works, since now all the ideas were to organize the next trade mission, of course, the markets in focus. And at the end you have not one event or instrument at one market, but you have several instruments, different instruments, for example, trade missions, exhibitions, and some information for specific markets, for these specific focus markets. And actually the idea is also to elaborate specific programs for these particular markets in order, again, to show the Ukrainian producers the instruments that could be used. It's not necessarily to do it like the experts with Export Promotion Office or with the ministry, but the idea is to show the variety of choices, the variety of markets and the variety of instruments that could be used for the particular markets, and to show the impact that these instruments could do for this or that likely sector.
Yeah. I have one final question for you. There is a saying that Ukrainians know how to produce great things, but often they don't know how to sell them to the right markets. And obviously you speak about these exhibitions and different instruments that you can use. Do you think that the export strategy can fill this gap, or do you think something else is needed to perhaps prompt these industries to start, actively looking at different markets?
You know that the idea of export strategy is not to fill all the gaps. It's impossible. We understand this, right? But the idea of the export strategy is to show the demand and to show the opportunities also for trade support institutions. That particular likely skills could be provided by business schools, by other institutions. Actually, last week, the Export Promotion Office announced the new program for creative industries, educational program, in order to teach them how to sell their products. And as we have talked before about prospective sectors, we have different sectors there. We have the really sophisticated number of sectors that are champions already now. It's, for example, food and beverage sector. Mm-hmm. It's growing year to year. We have IT sector there, but also we have the so-called infant sectors like creative industries. And actually the idea and the third goal of the strategy is to enhance skills development for the exporters, is to spin up the process of the whole private sector to get more skilled for this. Yeah. And we have to compete, you understand, we have to compete with really well-developed countries and their exporters, and we should move very fast in this regard.
But Ukraine has great potential, so we'll have to see how it goes. Thank you so much for coming into our studio today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Olesya Zaluska, the navigator of the project Export Strategy of Ukraine. You're watching UATV.